Colleagues, Minister, and officials, I'll call this meeting to order. It's meeting number 14. And we're here to deal with the main estimates and report on plans and priorities. Before we introduce the Minister and begin our proceedings for the benefit of the committee members, I would mention to you we will need about 15 minutes before the expiry of this meeting to go over some committee business, most of which we weren't able to discuss in the last meeting. So I'll be adjourning this meeting, the formal proceedings at least, and going into camera at approximately 5:15. So we have a bit of a truncated meeting today. We'll have just slightly less than an hour and a half for all of the questions that you have. With that, however, I would like to welcome Minister Foote before our committee once again. And Minister, would you care to introduce your officials with you? And then I'll ask Mr. Parker to do the same from Shared Services Canada, and we'll begin with your opening statement.
I certainly would, and thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. And today I'm joined by my Deputy Minister to my immediate right, Marie Lemay, who joined Public Services and Procurement Canada as recent as April the 11th, and we're delighted to have her. Next to her we have Associate Deputy Minister Gavin Liddy, and we also have to my immediate left the President of Shared Services Canada, Ron Parker, along with the Chief Operating Officer, John Golwacki.
Very much, Madam Minister. And now if you could commence with your opening statement. I believe it's about 10 minutes.
If that.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. We're here to discuss the Department's 2016-17 main estimates, Supplementary Estimates A, and our reports on plans and priorities. When I appeared before this committee on March 10th, we discussed a range of important initiatives, including the rehabilitation work in the Parliamentary Precinct, successes in real property management, Canada Post, and the modernization of IT infrastructure. As critical players in the day-to-day operations of the Government of Canada, Public Services and Procurement Canada and its portfolio are key to ensuring the government delivers on its ambitious agenda. Our work is underway, but much more has to be done to achieve needed changes and improvements. Today I'm happy to report to members on 5 key areas: greening government, service delivery, innovative practices, modernizing procurement, and budget investments. And I begin with our initiatives to support the greening of government. Greening initiatives received considerable support in Budget 2016, which contain measures to strengthen the middle class and investments in infrastructure to boost the economy. Among the budget's many green investments, I draw your attention to the $2.1 billion to allow Public Services and Procurement Canada to repair its large portfolio of properties and to green government operations. Of this amount, $1.2 billion has been allocated to upgrade the outdated energy system that heats and cools over 100 buildings in the National Capital Region. Much of this energy infrastructure, which includes several plants, was built in the 1950s. This investment in modern technology will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by almost 1/3 and reduce annual operating costs by up to 20%. It will result in a safer and more reliable system. When we talk about green initiatives, and in particular green buildings, most people think about construction that protects the health of the environment. To me, such buildings should also be those that protect the health of their occupants. That is why Public Services and Procurement Canada has, on April the 1st, prohibited the use of asbestos in its new construction and major renovation projects. In addition, beginning this summer, the Department is posting an online inventory of the buildings it owns or leases that contain asbestos. When it comes to service delivery, Canadians are at the heart of everything we do. We are continuously looking for ways to use evidence, facts, and research to better meet public needs. The Canada Post review, which I announced earlier this month, clearly illustrates this approach. We are undertaking this review to ensure that Canadians get quality postal service at a reasonable cost. All options, including those related to home delivery, are on the table. We want to hear from Canadians on the future of Canada Post. We are taking a phased approach to examine this important issue. In the first phase, an independent task force is conducting research, analyzing data, and reviewing international best practices. Task force members were selected based on a range of factors, including their specific experience, expertise, and skill sets. They come from various geographic locations across the country and bring unique perspectives to this important work. By the end of the summer, they will produce a comprehensive discussion paper on viable options for Canada Post. Engaging stakeholders and gathering their ideas and views are key to this process. Mr. Chair, as I mentioned during my last appearance before this committee, the second phase will focus on providing Canadians the opportunity to tell us about their needs for postal services. Seniors and those with disabilities will be heard. Canadians will be consulted from coast to coast to coast. This committee will be asked to engage the public in an informed discussion on how Canada Post can deliver quality service at a reasonable price. In addition to this important committee work, I encourage all members of Parliament to find ways to bring their constituents into this national conversation. Our government is determined to build a new and respectful relationship with all parliamentarians to move this issue forward. Organizations of all sizes and from all sectors are seized with the challenge of keeping pace with technology and embracing new and innovative ways of doing business. These challenges are particularly pronounced within governments, where complex, outdated systems are common. Thankfully, modernization efforts are underway on a number of fronts. Until recently, the government was using a pay system developed over 40 years ago. It had become inefficient, incompatible with other systems, and provided limited functionality. In response, after extensive testing, the government launched a new system called Phoenix, which is now available in 101 departments and agencies. This system provides employees with a more automated, stable, and modern tool to process pay requests. The implementation of Phoenix is a major undertaking, and we are working directly with departments to identify and solve problems before paychecks are even issued. As well, we have brought new staff on board to help with the transition. To further ensure that this project is heading in the right direction, we have engaged unions in an open relationship, held regular briefings for departments and media, and provided updates on issues and resolutions online. Since it was first implemented on February the 24th, 601 formal complaints were received out of nearly 1.2 million transactions as of last week. 524 of these complaints have been resolved, and we are addressing the remaining 77. In addition, we are closely tracking feedback from Phoenix users. As we continue to use the system and better understand it, we will see opportunities for further improvements and efficiencies. Innovation is a key driver at Shared Services Canada. The Government of Canada's IT infrastructure is a backbone to the effective delivery of services to Canadians, such as employment insurance, social benefits, and national security, including border security and policing services. Modernizing and transforming this IT infrastructure is a key priority of Shared Services Canada. The budget allocates $384 million over the next 2 years to support a multi-year whole-of-government IT transformation with a focus on upgrading mission-critical infrastructure. Another $77.4 million was provided over 5 years to strengthen cybersecurity and ensure robust protection for networks and systems that support not only the delivery of employment insurance and other benefit programs, but also digital communications and open data initiatives. These budget commitments will also enable Shared Services Canada to continue to improve the security of government of Canada's systems and networks, contributing to the government-wide response to the horizontal internal audit on IT security recently completed by the Office of the Comptroller General. Shared Service Canada is also engaging its partners, stakeholders, and IT industry experts to help validate its plans for modernization and transformation of the government's email, data center, and network services. This initiative has also drawn the attention of this committee, and I appreciate it that you took the time to study this complex file. Government does not have a monopoly on good ideas, and we cannot do everything we need to do alone. We must work with partners and stakeholders. Engagement and collaboration are critical. We are strengthening relationships at all levels, from my ministerial colleagues to partner and client departments, suppliers, unions, Aboriginal and Indigenous groups, as well as green and youth stakeholders. For instance, many of these individuals and groups have told us that the federal procurement system is still too complex and cumbersome. We are committed to modernizing procurement, simplifying government purchasing, and cutting red tape for both clients and suppliers. As well, working with Environment and Climate Change Canada, Shared Services Canada will help revitalize weather services and develop new solutions for better coverage of the North to improve shipping safety in the Arctic. Meaningful engagement requires us to bring greater transparency to what we do. The National Shipbuilding Strategy is a case in point. We should and can be much better at sharing with Canadians both the good news and the challenges that come with the strategy. We have to be straightforward with Canadians about the progress of individual projects, shipyard investments, contract awards, and other pertinent data. I am committed to publishing an annual report to Parliament starting this fall, as well as providing quarterly updates. Turning now to the 2016-17 main estimates, Public Services and Procurement Canada's total spending is expected to remain stable at $2.87 billion. The department is also seeking $351.6 million in additional funding through Supplementary Estimates A for the recapitalization of engineering assets, maintenance and repairs of federal buildings, as well as the maintenance and upgrade of federal infrastructure. Total spending by Shared Services Canada for this fiscal year is expected to be $1.55 billion, an increase of $105.8 million, or 7.3% over last year. This includes expenditures of $53.6 million to help retrofit the Carling campus for national defense and $26.4 million for cybersecurity, along with investments to support our partners across government on key initiatives such as strengthening digital infrastructure for Canada's research, education, and innovation communities. Shared Service Canada is also seeking $272.1 million in additional funding through Supplementary Estimates A to implement Budget 2016 commitments to cybersecurity and upgrading mission-critical infrastructure for high-performance computers in support of environment and climate change, Canada's weather services, as well as for Shared Services Canada's contribution to the resettlement of Syrian refugees. Mr. Chair, both organizations have been allocated significant funds to deliver programs and services to the benefit of Canadians. There is much to do, but I know we are up to the challenge. I've met hundreds of employees throughout these organizations. They are energized, committed, and eager to deliver. As I have discussed, they are pursuing a greener future. They are embracing innovation and a commitment to service, and they are working not only for, but with Canadians and other key stakeholders. I am proud to have the opportunity to keep this committee informed of the results of their efforts. Thank you, and I'm pleased to be able to take the committee's questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Before we begin, it is my understanding, Minister, you'll be with us until 4:30.
I will.
We should be able to get in then one complete round of 7-minute questions before your departure. Following that, colleagues, the rest of the officials will be with us until we adjourn to go into committee business. We'll start now with 7-minute rounds, and we first have up on the government side, Mr. Whalen.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'll be sharing 2 minutes of my time with Mr. Drouin. If you could just give me a heads up at the 5-minute mark, that'd be great. Thank you all for attending today. I will jump right into it. I've got a couple of questions for Minister Foote in respect of the modernizing procurement and the greening government initiatives that she spoke of in her opening comments. Something that has come before the committee a couple of times now is what seems to be a slight disconnect on the procurement side between responsibility of Public Services Procurement Canada and Shared Services Canada with respect to IT procurement. And I'm just wondering if the Minister can inform the committee if there's other areas where PSPC is still doing IT procurement and why most of the IT procurement has been outsourced, it seems, to SSC.
Gavin will take.
Yeah, Mr. Whalen. So the issue is that when Shared Services Canada was started up, we had all the procurement tools in our inventory. Those have since been moved over to Shared Services Canada, and we have a few regulatory and a couple of other issues to clean up still, but by and large, we've tried to divide the landscape in a very even process, so it's absolutely clear to suppliers and to government departments doing business which department does which. And John Glowacki and I have sort of been meeting on that on a monthly basis for about a year, and I think we've got it all buttoned up now.
And so I guess my follow-up question to the Minister is this an efficient division of labour, or should the procurement of IT hardware and other services be brought back in under the Public Services Procurement Canada umbrella?
I'm really interested in the work that the committee has been doing in terms of looking at shared services. And I'll be looking forward to the report coming out of this committee, which we will then take into account about whether we go down the road of bringing it all under PSC or not. So the report, the work that you're doing will be very helpful to the department.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the Greening Government Initiative, what specific things is your department doing to ensure that government buildings are energy efficient?
Well, you know, we think we should lead by example, and as I said in my remarks, we've allocated $1.2 billion to upgrade the heating and cooling systems of over 100 buildings in the National Capital Region to the Energy Services Acquisition Project. It'll reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1/3. It'll reduce annual operating costs by 20%, and it'll reinforce government's commitment to achieving climate change targets. So we're very focused on making sure that we have the resources to do what we need to do in keeping with what this government has said, and that is that we must give reducing greenhouse emissions priority.
Thank you. And I guess my final question before I hand it over to Mr. Drouin. In respect of these initiatives and the projected benefits, you talked about in this one initiative, 20% cost reduction and a third energy use reductions over time. What metrics are in place within PSPC to make sure that projects that have been funded by government and have expectations of environmental benefit is tracked going forward? In the budgeting process, we're tracking the money clearly to see whether or not a project is on budget or not. In respect of environmental benefits, are we tracking those in a similar fashion to ensure that Canadians are getting the environmental benefits they expect?
Absolutely. That's part of our overall plan. As a government, we're looking at delivering on the initiatives that we say we're going to do that. And to do that, of course, you have to have data. You have to be able to put measurements in place. And we're doing that. And that's part of our overall process to make sure that we achieve what we set out to achieve, given the resources that we've been given to do it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Monsieur Drouin, you have slightly less than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one question with regards to, you've mentioned that Canada has upgraded their payment system. It hadn't been done for the last 40 years, so I believe we're talking about Phoenix. And there had been some media reports that some employees were not getting paid. And I know there's always glitches in new systems, but what measures is your department taking to ensure that employees are getting paid? And what are we doing to fix the glitches as well?
Let me say at the outset that it's really important that all employees receive their pay and receive it on time. This is a new system, and as I have said earlier, and you reiterate, we're coming off a 40-year-old system. So even though we're seeing examples of where some people aren't being paid, the testing that was done previously was substantial to make sure that there would not be any glitches in the system, but it's hard to cover off everything. And what we're finding is that if there's an issue with overtime, for instance, if the human resources manager hasn't entered the overtime for a particular individual, then that can result in a delay in a person being paid. What we've done as a department is work with other departments to make sure that they know exactly what is expected of them and that they can enter the information that's required. But this is, when you consider there have been 1.2 million transactions and they're only outstanding right now 77 complaints, I think the employees who've taken responsibility for this initiative are to be commended. They've been working very hard. We've put additional resources in place. We've made sure that the Pay Centre have the individuals they need to work with the permanent staff there to make sure that people don't go without their pay. As much as we would like to be able to ensure that it never happens, we're working hard to make sure that it doesn't. But I expect until each department understands the process and what has to be entered into the system in order for everyone to get paid, we'll continue to have minor glitches in the system, but the priority for us as a department and all departments involved is to make sure that employees get paid on time and get the right amount of money. We've also worked with departments to make sure that they are making available, in cases where people aren't getting paid, emergency pay, so that they don't go without having a paycheck.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Benini, 7 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome once again to the Minister. We're always pleased to have you here with your representatives from your departments and agencies. Thank you very much also for having given us a heads up about the Post-Canada review. It was greatly appreciated. We are very proud to see that we have one of your deputy ministers is an engineer. As an engineer myself, I see that it's really very nice to see that we have an engineer here, and I'm delighted to see that there's an engineer in charge of public works here in Canada. Madam Minister, we've already heard from people from Post Canada. My first question is the following. They had a 5-point strategy to reduce costs by some $800 million. When they appeared before the committee, they said they'd put an end to implementing this 5-point strategy. which was going to bring about savings. Who took this decision to end the implementation of the 5-point strategy?
As Minister responsible for Canada Post, the idea being that the outcry from the public at large in terms of the 5-point plan, but in particular the installation of roadside mailboxes became an issue. So how do we best deal with that issue? How do we reach out and hear from Canadians? So the reality is that what we had to do was there were aspects of the 5-point plan that for us to continue with it would prevent us doing what we needed to do in terms of having an independent, comprehensive review of Canada Post, looking at what quality services could be delivered and at a reasonable cost.
Oui, je peux vous assurer de la collaboration.
I can assure you that our committee will want to cooperate in the study on Canada Post. But stopping this study led to losses of some $500 million. Given the financial situation of Canada Post at the moment, they're struggling to keep their heads above water, and they're struggling to break even. So they're in a financial situation that's very precarious, and now we've taken away a means from them that would help them be profitable by putting an end to this plan. There's also the problem with the pension plan, the $6 billion issue, the pension plan. That's another problem that's hanging over them. What do you think can be done about this? Obviously, taxpayers are waiting to see what will be done, and how do you see things proceeding?
The aspect in terms of the installation of roadside mailboxes would be where putting a moratorium on that would have been where Canada Post would have probably now the savings they had anticipated receiving. They would not as a result of that, as a result of putting a moratorium on the installation of the roadside mailboxes, because home delivery would be continuing in the areas where they weren't installed. So Canada Post is going to be part and parcel of this comprehensive review. They're a major stakeholder, just as are the unions and just as are Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The idea being that they know that they will continue to get a lot of revenue from parcel delivery, because that's where mail is focused these days. Their letter volume is down, so they were not getting the revenue they expected through letter mail, but they will continue to get revenue generated through parcel post. So we're confident working with Canada Post that we can deal with issues, but Canada Post has to remain self-sustaining. And the one element of that with the 5-point plan was that the installation of the roadside mailboxes was the one aspect of it where we put a moratorium on that affected their savings.
OK, je vois que le temps...
I see that time is going by quickly. There are 3 out of 4 Canadians who don't get post delivered to their door. The implementation of this plan was stopped, and that could cause Canada Post to go into a deficit at a time where the letter delivery is going down and the number of parcels isn't enough either. So we're taking away from Post Canada the means of being profitable, if you will. I'm going to be sharing my time, but I'm not sure how much time I have left, Mr. Chair. 2 minutes? Then I'll share my time with my colleague.
Why don't we get tomorrow?
On va avoir un autre round, Monsieur le Ministre?
Another turn with the Minister?
No, is in a surplus position. So we're looking at by the end of December having a review completed and a report ready.
They are on a surplus because they're on a pension holiday. Were you aware of the losses you were inflicting on the taxpayers by interrupting the 5-step program? It wasn't just the mailboxes, it was the freezing of the price increase of the stamps as well. Did you take that into consideration?
Everything was taken into consideration. We want to make sure that
it was more than just the mailboxes.
Yes,
it was.
Absolutely. And we want to make sure that Canadians are consulted on this very comprehensive independent review.
Can you update us where we are on the fair wage policy? We discussed on March 10th. You said we weren't very far down the road. Where are we with that right now, please?
We're working with our colleagues. This department doesn't have the lead on the fair wage policy.
But it's in your mandate letter.
it's part of in cooperation with other departments. So we're working on it together. We don't have the lead on that particular file. Another department does.
Who does?
It would be, is it ESDC? ESDC.
Okay. I was going to ask you about the fair wage policy, but I don't think you have any answers for me.
We will have answers. Just give us time. We're working very hard on all of our files.
Let's go. I think my time's pretty much
Cut it off there and go to Mr. Weir for 7 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Minister. Canada's steel industry is struggling against a tide of offshore steel dumped into our market. Earlier this month, there were more layoffs at the Evraz steel mill at the north end of my riding. Producing a ton of steel in Canada with relatively clean energy and strong environmental standards emits far less carbon than producing it offshore. A further environmental advantage of using Canadian-made steel in Canada is that it minimizes the emissions from transporting the steel. In the main estimates, your department is seeking funding to undertake improvements to federal buildings, the Alaska Highway, the Esquimalt graving dock, and the Alexandra Bridge here in Ottawa. Will these projects be completed using Canadian-made steel?
There's been no decision made on having all Canadian-made steel used in these projects. There's a variety of steel that's used, Canadian steel as well as steel that's imported. No decision has been made at this point on whether or not to go with just Canadian steel.
Okay, well, last time that you appeared before our committee, I asked you about steel for the new Champlain Bridge, a huge federal infrastructure project. Your department's written response indicates that 19% of the steel will be made in Canada. Do you believe that that's an appropriate percentage? And if not, what steps will you take to source more of the steel from our country?
That's certainly something that we're looking at as a department. I think it's important for us in light of the steel industry, and you've already referenced it. We've had representation from other members of Parliament as well. It's important for us to look at opportunities to maximize benefits for Canadians. So that's on a number of fronts, including on the use of Canadian-made steel.
Okay. According to its 2016-17 report on plans and priorities, the Defense Procurement Secretariat will, quote, launch an open and transparent competition to replace the CF-18 fighter aircraft, focusing on options to match Canada's defense needs, end quote. Will the F-35 be considered as one of those options?
D&D is taking the lead, determining what its needs will be, not what it wants, but what the needs of the Canadian Armed Forces will be. So the review by Canada Post, the review by the Defence Minister is ongoing. So what that decision will be, I don't know at this point.
Okay, so the fact that your party promised not to buy F-35s during the election wouldn't preclude your government from procuring them now?
I'm not going to make any kind of declaration on what we will or won't do. Obviously, the defence review is an important component of what the Minister of Defence is looking at right now in terms of what the needs are for Canada in terms of its defence.
Okay, the Phoenix pay system seems to have many problems. Some federal employees have gone for months without pay, and some departments have had to start issuing emergency checks. Employees of the RCMP depot in my riding have contacted my office about problems getting paid. What actions have you taken to resolve this issue and ensure that the government pays our public servants correctly and on time?
And I appreciate your question. It's of concern to all of us when employees go without getting paid. We've been working very hard. As I said earlier, we have gone through $1.2 million transactions. We have 77 outstanding files, but over 500 have been solved. So we want to make sure that no employee goes without being paid, but they're as with any system, when you're doing away with one system and introducing another one, there are bound to be issues. But that doesn't mean that employees should have to go without pay. That's why the emergency measures were put in place. to try and take care of that.
Sure. So you've kind of focused on the relatively small number of outstanding files. And I wonder if part of the reason for that may be that employees can't actually get through to your call center.
We have put additional resources into the call center. We have sent additional people there to work with the permanent staff of the call center, again trying to ensure that every call gets responded to, and not only gets responded to, but gets dealt with, that their issue gets dealt with. So we are staying on top of that. Again, tomorrow is another payday, so we'll know better tomorrow in terms, we'll have, of course, more than 1.2 million transactions come tomorrow, but we're staying on top of it. We're getting a weekly report of what the issues are, if there are issues, new issues arising, and how we're dealing with them in an expeditious way.
Okay, so knowing what you know now, do you think it was a good thing that the Government of Canada adopted this Phoenix pay system?
Absolutely. I mean, there was the 40-year-old pay system had become ineffective. After a while, most IT systems need to be updated. This is one that certainly needed to be. A lot of testing was done, and as you know, I mean, this was a project of the previous government, and I'm told that a lot of effort went into trying to make sure that every possible issue would have been dealt with or would have been tested. But then you cannot anticipate every issue that will arise. So I think it was the right move, and I can tell you from the work that's being done by the employees at the centre and by those who are leading the file that they're working above and beyond.
Okay. My colleague tried to ask about the fair wages policy, and he doesn't have much luck, but I guess I'll try again. I'm wondering if this policy is actually going to be in place and applicable for some of these infrastructure projects in the main estimate. So I already asked about improvements to federal buildings, the Alaska Highway, the Esquimalt Dock, the Alexandra Bridge. The federal government is moving ahead with these construction projects. Are people employed on those projects going to have the benefit of this modernized fair wages policy?
That's certainly the intention, and as we work together as departments engaged in this file, it's to try and bring it to fruition as quickly as we can.
So when will it be in place?
I don't have a date for you at this point, but we are working together as departments to move this file forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. We will go into I think it will be the last 7-minute intervention and before the minister has to leave us. And I believe we have Mr. Grewal, and you're splitting time with Madame Shanahan, is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you can split, I believe, 2 to 3 minutes at the end, just let us know. Thank you, Minister, for coming, and all your officials as well. Minister, small businesses are so important to the Canadian economy, and from time to time, actually not from time to time, a lot of small businesses want to get involved in the government procurement system. Our current procurement system is very complex and difficult for small business to navigate. The tendering process is onerous and time-consuming and challenging. What can we do to improve that and make it more accessible for our small businesses?
Thank you. And like you, I recognize the value of small businesses to our economy. And when you look at the number of people employed throughout the country, a significant number of those are employed through small and medium-sized enterprises. We're working very hard to modernize procurement. We're working very hard to make sure that everyone has access to government procurement. We are recognizing that we buy everything from pencils to ships to jets. So there are components of procurement that small and medium-sized enterprises can avail of, and there's no reason why on the larger files that those who are able to take advantage of those and in a position to deliver on those can't engage small and medium-sized enterprises in terms of subcontracts. So we're working very hard to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to take advantage of government procurement, especially small, medium-sized enterprises, which tend to be located in a lot of cases in rural areas of our country, as well as in the smaller urban areas as well.
Thank you, Minister. Asbestos. It's a big problem, and for years, Canadian workers and employees and visitors in public buildings have been exposed to it. You mentioned in your opening statement that we're doing an inventory, and as the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, we recently banned
Yeah,
Okay.
in government buildings.
Asbestos
Yes.
in new build and renovations in PSPC buildings.
Yeah.
Can you tell me where we at in preparing an inventory of all federal buildings that contain asbestos?
And we are very concerned about any amount of asbestos that may exist in government-owned buildings or buildings that government leases. That's why we're doing the inventory, and I think by the end of the summer, we should in fact have that inventory completed. Our priority is to make sure that that our employees, in particular, and anyone who visits those buildings, are not exposed to asbestos. So from the perspective of Public Services Procurement Canada, we took the lead right away to say that we were going to do everything we can to make sure that in new builds we would not include in RFPs the requirement, or anybody would not be able to come to the table saying they were going to be using asbestos. And our lease buildings, we're looking at those as well.
Okay, in terms of the inventory that's going to be assessed, so there'll be just tracking what buildings contain asbestos, or will there be an action plan implemented to ensure that they're brought up or removed?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we could not, if we identify asbestos in a building, we couldn't in good conscience rest knowing that we have employees working in that environment or visitors to those buildings being exposed to that. So where buildings are leased, we'll have to work with the landlords of those or the owners of those buildings to deal with the issue.
Thank you, Minister.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair.
I believe it'll be Madame Ratanzi rather than Madame
Thank you,
Shannon.
Minister. Thank you
3
for
minutes,
being
please.
here. For how many minutes? 2, 3? Oh, perfect. So I was listening to the questioning on Canada Post, and I was quite amused by the fact that somebody talked about cost. And we had the CEO, Deepak Chopra, come last time before us, and he told us he hadn't done any consulting. So had he done the consulting and not taken the route he did, I guess all of us as parliamentarians wouldn't be in this position where we have to call a task force, stop this nonsense, and start consulting with Canadians. And I am so glad that you, 2 weeks ago, last week, you announced a 2-stage process for the review of Canada Post. Now, I know there's the first phase is the independent task force, and the second phase you are asking the committee to with the consultation process. Could you outline the role of this committee? How would you like to see it proceed?
Thank you for the question. We have what I think is a very competent task force, certainly very independent-minded individuals who I'm pleased took on this task. They are being asked to prepare a report based on surveys, based on some consultation they will do, but they'll be looking at best practices. They'll look at what's happening internationally. So the report itself, the task force itself, will be presented to me as Minister, which I will then ask the committee to take and consult Canadians on. I think as a parliamentary committee, you're more in a better position to do that, and you will determine where you go and who you consult with. But the reality is that we want this task force report, because even though we're hoping that the task force will uncover every conceivable line of business that Canada Post could be in, there's a lot of work that has to go into this. They're supported by a secretariat in PSPC who are working with them. The work that's going to be involved the next 4 months by that task force will be really comprehensive. The type of work that I wouldn't have thought that the committee would have had the time to prepare or get involved in. But the idea is for the committee, and if you see fit to do that, is to really get out there and consult Canadians and find out what they have to say. The task force will be available online, be available to Canadians to see. So as you carry out your work, Canadians will react to that task force report. But you also, I would think, as a committee, be looking to Canadians to have their say in terms of how Canada Post should go forward, the types of services it should provide, and at a reasonable cost, bearing in mind that Canada Post must remain self-sustaining.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Madam Ratanzi. Minister, thank you for your appearance here once again. You're excused, and we'll suspend for about 2 minutes while we have other witnesses, both from Procurement Canada and Shared Services Canada, come forward. Thank you again, Minister. Colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll begin. But before we proceed into direct questioning, we do have some new witnesses appearing with us today. So, Madame Lemay, I would ask you to please introduce those of your colleagues that have joined us at the table, and then Mr. Parker, I'll ask you to do the same.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. À côté...
Thank you very much. We have our Mr. Gavin Liddy, our Deputy Assistant Minister. We also have Julie Charon, and we have Kevin Radford, Lisa Campbell, who is responsible for procurement and defence and other areas, and we have Rob Wright, who is for the parliamentary precinct.
You have an official joining us as well.
Right, Mr. Glacki, the Chief Operating Officer, Alain Duplanty, our ADM of Corporate Services and Chief Financial Officer, and Mr. Graham Barr, our Director General of Strategic Policy Branch.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I think we're going to start afresh with another 7-minute round. That would ensure that every party member around this table will have at least one opportunity for questioning. With that said, we will start for the first 7-minute round. Intervention, Monsieur Durand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here. We appreciate it. I guess shared services. You guys have been a lot in front of the community for the past for the past month. Just with regards to shared services, my question is for you. We know that the previous government removed savings before consolidation was even done. We understand that, but If you had to start over, what would you change? I guess you'd tell me not remove the savings before they're realized.
Well, thank you for the question. I think in terms of lessons learned, I would go back and think about the culture change that's implied in bringing 43 departments together, 42 departments together, the personnel from those departments, and plan for that in 43 different ways of doing things, 43 different ways of processing service requests. So really focus on what the plan is and how to bring people together as quickly as possible to get a unified service. Secondly, I'd establish the benchmarks that you were starting from a lot more clearly in terms of what is the asset base that's being inherited, what is the service levels. All of that is quite typically done in a outsourcing, and in this case it's an outsourcing to Shared Services Canada situation. And that's one thing that we heard from Ontario, for example, that was done that has really helped their measure their progress and understand what they were working with. And I think it's also important around people. The third element is to keep the staff engaged and have the space and time to invest in the training, the tools, and the processes that will jumpstart the transformation overall.
Thanks. And talk to me about the financial structure that you have with the department clients. How does that work? And how do you, what happens if SSC doesn't deliver a service on time with the departments? How does that work, the financial structure?
We have a combined financial structure. We have a base appropriation, and the initial base was determined back in when the department was set up, 2009-10 fiscal year to benchmark. And departments were asked how much are they spending on these IT services. When Shared Services was stood up, that amount of funding was transferred to it to provide the services at that level at that time. Since then, of course, there's been demand growth, and very, very strong demand growth. Storage is growing at 50% a year. Bandwidth demand is growing, we forecast about 30% this year. Video conferencing minutes are up enormously, millions of minutes more. And so we are evolving the costing structure that we have in a cost management model to take into account the fact that this demand is stronger than forecast, and to provide those services, there's a fee for service above a baseline level, and that's the direction we're going overall.
Great. You've spoken about demand, and we know that technology changes really quickly in this world. And how are you adapting or ensuring that in your contracts, in your RFPs, that you're adapting the innovation piece in the contracts to ensure that when we contract out to a company today, we can allow innovation within that contract? How are you structuring that?
That's something that we're looking at in future contracts. I would say most of the contracts we have right now, they tend to be a little bit more traditional. It's give me a telephone service. But that's actually a very key point, and oftentimes it's missed because there's an expectation that, for instance, we'll want telephony from a certain company, but we won't put in that extra piece for innovation. And from my experience, you absolutely have to set some money aside. It costs something. So it's important that going forward, we always have a line that says not only externally but internally, we'll have money for labs, we call them sandboxes, development spaces, et cetera, to be able to have the man hours and also allow the contractors to come in. Part of this doesn't even involve money. It involves terms and conditions to say, in the case of the RFP, when you put your response on the table, we will also allow you to put in value adds, and we will assess those in addition to the rest of the responses. So you'll have an apples to apples among all the responses, but then you also get this opportunity to say, oh, there's some value add features that we hadn't anticipated, despite all the collaboration we do in our procurement process, to be able to say, oh, here's something even better.
Great. How much time, Mr. Chair? I just want to ask, and you and I had a conversation the last time about procurement, and I just want to make sure that, is it your belief that SSC is putting the right checks and balances within the requirements to ensure that there's fair competition in the vendor community, and when you're procuring, do you think you have the right fair checks and balances in there?
Yes. I mean, we're maturing the organization, but I absolutely believe we have the right checks and balances. Competition wins. You always do better with competition. Once in a while you need to sole source, but to the extent you can always promote competition, it's absolutely worth it. That's the sum of my experience.
And how does it work if a vendor feels that they haven't been properly treated? What's the process within SSC? Because normally we would go to PWGSC if it was defense, we'd go to PWGSC, but now that it reports up to Mr. Parker, how do you ensure that the vendor community feels that they're being treated fairly?
Well, we have a number of channels to work with the vendor community. We have a roundtable that is IT roundtable that we meet regularly with to go through the issues and the approach to procurement. There's a number of subcommittees from that group looking at different issues related to the procurement, and the innovation was one of the issues. So those concerns come up directly through those channels as well. We have a very open door in terms of meeting with the vendor community, whether it's individual vendors or whether it's associations. Of course, it's outside of a particular issue, procurement process, but we're all ears and working with the community directly to have a very, very collaborative procurement process as well. So that's the other element. As we go through the procurements, they're structured in a way that there's a dialogue with them, and it's a very parallel process to what procurement, public services and procurement uses in that sense. It's very iterative with industry to derive even the RFP requirements, and there's should be no surprises through that process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. Mr. Blaney, 7 minutes, please.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Monsieur Parker,
Thank you. Welcome once again, Mr. Parker. You were here just a few weeks ago, and at that time you talked about an ambitious program to have all the departments migrate to this central platform. I believe you said there were 3 particular areas: emails, the telephone systems. I think that's what you said. Email, network, the communication network, and migration of work to the new data centres. Yes, the data centres, that was what it was. There was a lot of work to be done on that front, and we are getting ready, we're getting ourselves organised so we can go and visit one of the data centres. You talked about the delays in this migration to the data centres, and that you said you'd be able to get back to us, perhaps in the fall, with some more information. Since we last saw each other, have you got any additional information that you'd be able to share with us? At what point do you think you'll be able to come back to the committee and give us an evaluation? Obviously, there's funding involved. I'm quite interested in the savings, because obviously all of this has been done with a view to saving money, bringing everything together and producing savings. So I'd like to hear you tell us a little bit about how this will be done, even if we do expect it to be a little bit more difficult. How are we going to get these anticipated savings? How are they going to come about? Answer: well, we are still working on this project. We are making progress, but we are not yet at a place where I could give you more details. There will be an external review of the the proposals that will take place by the fall, before the fall. And in the fall, we'll have a plan. It will go to the Minister, to Cabinet, and then we have to take all of that into consideration as well. Question, so you're still talking then about the fall, perhaps late autumn, if I read between the lines. At any rate, it'll be the fall before you can give me an answer. We're going to be continuing our work in the meantime. We have had witnesses that came and who were satisfied with the services that had been offered. They were tended to be quite small departments. They didn't have a complicated infrastructure. There was the example of the School of Public Service, the Integrity Commissioner. They were fairly satisfied and said that the good work has been done. Thank you, Mr. Parker. I would like to now move over to my favourite engineer here at Public Works. Madame Lemay, you said, and I asked this question for the minister. I had this question for the minister. There was $2.1 billion in the budget for this year, and a large part of this was for the heating system. Would you be able to give me a breakdown of the costs? How this $2.1 billion will be invested? Will you tell me a little bit more about how it will be spent? Answer. Well, as you won't be surprised to learn, this is something that interests me greatly, and I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Wright, or perhaps Kevin, who has the details. My colleague is going to give you the details of these projects, because these are indeed very important projects.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
To the $1.2 billion for the ESAP project. About a month ago or so, I was at the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors in Washington, and we were talking internationally about how much infrastructure contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. And it's about 40% internationally. So taking the actual heating plants and the systems that provide heating and cooling to about 85 different buildings using 1950s type technology is a huge coup from a GHG perspective. I can provide the committee the detailed breakdown of each of the projects that are associated with that particular project. There are a number of projects that are going on right now around the design and the planning of what that system will look like. But there is also some remediation work that's going on at the pumping stations, at the boiler plant, et cetera, that also is going on in parallel. And it's quite a detailed list. Would you like me to provide the details?
Well, it's clear with this $1.2 billion that is mainly going in the National Capital Region, but the total amount is $2.1 billion, so that leaves $900 million. So is it possible to have to tell us what this amount is dedicated for?
Sure. Part of the $2.1 million was a program integrity submission that we had put forward in Budget 2016, which basically was looking at the current state of the assets that we have within our portfolio. In many cases, the operating budgets that were supporting those assets were below standards in the private sector. We used our main service provider, Brookfield Global Systems, to provide us with some comparators of what the status of the services were in our buildings versus what was done in the private sector, and our services were considerably lower. So a portion of that is to uplift our ability to operate the assets that we have and raise those particular standards. For instance, many of the mechanical systems in our buildings, like you would have in your car, we were going beyond any preventative maintenance. In fact, we were just doing corrective maintenance on many of those mechanical systems and supporting systems in the buildings. We are also just leveraging health and safety. So there was a large repair bow wave that had been created.
Okay.
So
and it's all over your infrastructure,
yes,
your buildings. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
We'll now go to Mr. Weir for 7 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to follow up on an issue that I raised with the Minister about the use of Canadian-made steel in federal infrastructure projects. In the department's written response to my previous inquiry, the statement was the new Champlain Bridge Corridor contract was awarded to the lowest compliant proposal based in part on a fixed price for the design and construction work. The contract contains specific requirements related to the performance of material, but does not contain requirements related to their origin. Now, it sounded as though the minister suggested that it would be possible to look at the amount of Canadian steel that was being used. I'm just wondering how that fits with a procurement requirement that doesn't seem to take account of the origin of the steel.
So, Mr. Weber, we are very seized with the issues, that issue, and like the minister said, we are discussing this, but maybe it is, as you probably know, complex in terms of having to specify and some of the different rules and regulations around the procurement. And maybe Ms. Campbell can give you a little bit more detail on specifically the steel portion.
Happy to. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, Canada uses a number of mechanisms to leverage the largest public spend for the benefit of Canadian companies. We do it in two ways. One is by giving them access to global markets through trade agreements, and then the other way is by applying policies that we have that ensure that procurement's leverage for industrial benefit to Canada. A Canadian content policy encourages industrial development in Canada by limiting procurement to Canadian goods and services where there's sufficient competition to do it in Canada. And we also have an industrial and technological benefits policy that stimulates Canadian industry participation in military procurements and investments in other high-value sectors of Canadian industry. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just wondering if you could explain how that fits with the department's written response that there was no requirement or no expectation at all around the steel being made in Canada.
So we will look at every procurement. We'll look at what are the requirements of the procurement, where is their long-term value for Canadian businesses. We engage with industry at the outset of procurements. We hear their feedback that the parts that they're very interested in increasingly is in the long-term in-service support and maintenance in complex procurements. That's where they see high value. So we will look at raw materials as well as at in-service support and maintenance over the long term. And I can share with you that fully 38 of procurements go to Canadian small and medium-sized businesses, so we really do a lot of outreach to make sure that Canadian businesses are engaged and have access to federal procurements.
Okay, so how heavily do those concerns about industrial development and Canadian jobs weigh into these procurement decisions on civilian infrastructure?
It's top of mind for us. We work with client departments and also Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. They've recently hired a firm to help them do a map of Canadian industrial capabilities so that when we do procurements, we can target them, making sure we take advantage of our industrial strengths, both existing and also nascent.
Okay, because I'm struck by the fact that in your report on plans and priorities for the Defence Procurement Secretariat, it says that it will, quote, work closely with national defence and the defence industry to leverage purchases of defence equipment to encourage suppliers to invest in innovation and exports to create jobs and economic growth in Canada. So would you say that there's a similar level of priority for civilian procurement?
We are, as I think the Minister mentioned, and also you may have seen in the mandate letters, we're working with Treasury Board to make sure that the socioeconomic benefits that the government identifies can be applied in a holistic way, not just to defence procurements, but all federal procurements. And as I think the committee is aware, they're about half and half of the roughly $17 billion that's spent each year. Half is large, complex military procurements, and the other is major procurements such as nuclear facilities and bridges. And what we're doing is modernizing our procurement tools to make sure that whatever the socioeconomic desire is, it can be applied in procurements to the extent possible.
Okay, excellent. Now, another thing I wanted to follow up on was this question of using federal government buildings as a potential venue for affordable housing. I had previously asked how many such sites there were in Saskatchewan, and the written response from the department was that 4 federal buildings had been examined, and none of them had very good potential for affordable housing. So I wonder, will that information be used to try to encourage other federal housing programs to provide greater support to Saskatchewan, given that it seems that our province won't get much out of this repurposing of federal office buildings?
Thank you. Kevin, did you want to?
Sure. We are working very closely with ESDC and with CMHC in developing an inventory of our holdings that may be applicable to the Affordable Housing Initiative. And we have looked at and examined all of the homes that we have in our current jurisdiction. Many of those are up in the north area. Some are occupied, some are not. Some are in a state of repair. And our contribution thus far has been to create a template of where are they located, what type of zoning are they in, what's their condition, what it would be the easiest way to move them into other sectors to support this initiative. And we created this template, and now we're reaching out to custodians who also, I should mention that we actually look after about 30% of the overall custodial space. So there are places like the RCMP, where my colleague Ellen comes from, that also have homes, D&D, etc. And we're going to share the template that we've put together with those custodians so that we can gather a GC, a Government of Canada listing. And that's about where we are. It's really our contribution is developing that inventory.
Okay, but it sounds like you have, and that for Saskatchewan, there's really not much prospect of these buildings being used to provide affordable housing. So I wonder if that information is somehow going to be communicated to other departments so that Saskatchewan does receive its fair share of federal investment in housing.
Yeah, I think that from the overall person who's the overall department that's responsible for affordable housing and for creating a policy in that jurisdiction is largely ESDC and CMHC. So what we are doing is providing the inventory, and then we're supporting that in a collaborative way so that as they develop policies and mechanisms to transition either homes or buildings in our infrastructure for other purposes, that we'll have that ready for them to inform that policy discussion as it goes on, likely in the fall time frame.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Ayoub, 7 minutes, please.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of shared services and CPAC, we're asking for 60 million, which is about the same as was requested last year. In terms of translation and language services, $6.3 million for 16-17, and $7 million for 18-19. So there has been a change there, and I wonder why I also see there's been a reduction in the amount spent on translation services, and I see also that there's a reduction in staffing. Is that the reason behind that? Answer: well, yes, the revenue has dropped. It's not just to do with the attrition. There's the fact that there are people that are leaving to retire to take their retirement, and then we see because of that there is a drop in revenues. In terms of client satisfaction, we talk about 85% is the figure that I have. How did you get to 85%? Where did you get this figure from? How does the Translation Bureau measure satisfaction? Well, the 85% figure was based on the results of previous years. In PSC, we are carrying out a number of surveys on client satisfaction. There's a degree of consolidation going on as well, and we're going to be using a new method to measure client satisfaction, but this 85% is a historical figure. This new method then, could you tell us anything about that? We have more than a dozen of these surveys, client satisfaction surveys. We have them for Kevin's group and for Lisa's groups as well.
Client satisfaction surveys, and every year we update them. So the idea is to be, consolidating them into a more cohesive way so we can measure one service against another. et aussi le secrétariat de la consolidation.
There's also the Treasury Board Secretariat, which gave us guidelines and directives.
Departments as well. So that is where we're going.
Et on a identifié une dizaine de questions qui vont être communes.
And we've identified a list of about 10 questions that will be common to all the departments. There is also the possibility of external translation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you understand by this? Answer. Well, there's a test going on at the moment related to crowdsourcing, where we're trying to get more collaboration with experts in the language industry. So it's an innovative way to try and get more collaboration from other experts. And will we find out more about this over the upcoming weeks? Is that what I have to understand? Yes. I know that this is a subject that my colleagues already talked about social housing and federal buildings. I understand that 1 in 4 Canadians experiences difficulty in paying for housing. 1 in 8 experiences difficulty in getting good quality, safe, salubrious housing. The former government neglected this area. And so I would like to know where are we with the inventory of of federal buildings that are to be used for social housing. Where are we with that? What's the planning that's been done over the next few months? Kevin, do you want to take that one? Thank you for the question. We've completed our inventory for our department, and we have found that there are 207 houses that are on the list and 224 buildings. And we've created a template for the other custodians.
Develop a Government of Canada list. So we've also assessed them by potential for the affordable housing as well. I can give you those specific numbers if you would like, and the list that we have in place.
I'm not sure how much time I've got left here. Normally, after you do an inventory, one normally has an action plan. It's good to know where it is you actually want to head with the inventory. Do you have an action plan that's already in place or being developed for this social housing? Answer, we support other departments. We are involved in policy and process for the action plan. Our mandate is to create, or was to create an inventory, and that's what we've done. Inaudible? And we have communicated that to our colleagues. Thank you, that was all I had. Do I have any time left?
On cybersecurity, the SEC's estimates include an increase of $26.4 million, and that's to address current vulnerabilities in the government's security network. Can you please elaborate on what's being done in the medium term to protect our information and our security?
What's to protect? Okay. In the mains, there's 3 main projects that this funding is targeted to. The completion of the migration of the National Research Council applications and data to the new network, improving enterprise management of internal credentials, so who's who and should they have access to what level of access to networks, and the consolidation of federal government department access to Canadian network for the advancement of research industry and education, otherwise known as CANARY, and the addition of censoring and monitoring to that network. So that's an important linkage. That's the main major network for scientists and others to use. That's a high-speed network across Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. And sorry, Mr. Greenwald, I think we're going to have to cut it off now. We're overtime already, and I have a sense that the response might take us either deeper into overtime. Colleagues, I think what I'm going to do now, with your permission, is excuse the witnesses now. It'll take a few minutes for them to leave and to clear the room while we go into in-camera. Not only do we have a number of items on our committee business list, we've got a number of votes on the main estimates we have to dispense with as well. So with that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance. We do appreciate it. You are excused. We'll suspend for about 2 minutes. While we vote on the main estimates, we are in public. Once we dispense with the votes, we will go in camera immediately for committee business. Now, we have two options here, and I'll just bring those forward to the attention of the committee members. I believe all of you first have got a list of the votes, the 33 votes we have in front of you. It can be done one of two ways. They can be voted in totality as a package, or they can be voted individually. And either way is fine, but I ask for one suggestion on the government side to vote with them as a package of 33, and it would be an either up or down on that premise, or we can vote individually.
I think as a group is fine.
Mr. Weir? All right, I will ask then, we have 33 votes. I don't believe I'm required to read them into the record because they will be placed on the record. We will just have a quick vote whether the main estimates, 33 votes, are carried, negatized, or rejected. Can we have indication from the government? Madam Ratanzi, in favor?
Carried.
Madam Shanahan?
Carried.
Monsieur Ayub? Mr. Whalen? Carried. Monsieur Joanne? Mr. McCauley? Monsieur Weir?
Vote in favor.
It is carried. Thank you. We will now suspend very, very shortly while we go in camera.